Okay, let's unpack this. When you think of Ireland, what's the first image that just fires up in your brain?
Oh, it's immediate.
It is, right. For most of us, and honestly for me too, before I spent days with this source stack, it's the postcard version.
The green fields, the pint of Guinness.
Exactly. The rolling green fields, maybe a pint of stout settling on a bar, a fiddle player in the corner. It's cozy, it's familiar.
It is familiar. It's the brand Ireland.
Yeah.
And that image isn't wrong exactly. I mean, the sources confirm the pubs are very real, but it is so incredibly incomplete.
Incomplete is the word. It's like judging a book by the movie poster.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So for today's deep dive, we are going way past that postcard. We have a fascinating and frankly a kind of eclectic stack of sources to get us there.
Very eclectic mix.
We've got the DK Eyewitness travel guide, which is great. It gives us the lay of the land, literally, and the modern culture. That's our baseline.
But then we have the curveballs.
Right. We have this really challenging history blog called The Complete Guide to Ancient Irish History, and it is going to completely rewrite your mental timeline of everything.
It really does. It throws out dates that just don't seem possible.
And then something heavy but absolutely essential, the official text of the agreement, which most people know as the Good Friday Agreement from 1998.
Which is just a remarkable document. It's basically the operating system, the legal and political framework that allows modern Ireland to function in peace.
So our mission today is to connect those dots. We're going to try and figure out how this tiny island on the edge of the Atlantic went from these prehistoric mysteries to the land of saints and scholars, and then somehow to the political miracle of the peace process.
And if you're looking for a theme, I think it's engineering. I mean, whether you're looking at ancient farmers hauling stones to build what's basically a time machine, or modern politicians engineering a treaty to stop a war, you see this constant struggle.
A struggle to engineer survival and identity.
Exactly.
Against all the odds.
So let's jump right into the deep end. The history. I think most of us have this idea that Irish history starts maybe with the Celts.
Or a bit before with some stone circles, yeah.
But this history blog source dropped a date that it stopped me cold, 33,000 BC.
It is a startling figure. The conventional wisdom for a very long time was that Ireland was, uninhabited until the Mesolithic period, around 8,000 BC, after the ice sheets pulled back.
Right.
But this source highlights evidence from Castle Pook Cave in County Cork. They found butchered reindeer bone, clear evidence of human activity from the Paleolithic.
33,000 BC. That is 20,000 years earlier than the standard history books. That's not a small change. That's an entirely different epoch.
It completely reframes the island's story. We aren't just talking about the ancestors of people we know today. We're talking about hunter-gatherers on a landscape that looked totally different.
Probably walking across land bridges. Right?
Probably. Before the island was even fully an island, it just suggests that humans have been trying to make a go of it on that rock for a very, very long time.
But the real civilization moment, I guess.
Yeah.
The moment they stop just surviving and start building things that last forever, that comes later.
Right. The source focuses heavily on the Neolithic, around 4,000 BC.
This is where we get to Newgrange. Now, I've seen pictures, that big, round, grassy mound with the white stone front, but the details here, the logistics are just mind-blowing. It was built around 3,200 BC.
Which, just to give you some context, is 5 centuries before the pyramids of Giza.
500 years older than the pyramids.
I didn't have the wheel.
No wheel, no metal tools. And yet, the source breaks down the supply chain. They brought white quartz all the way from the Wicklow Mountains. That's 70 kilometers away.
70 kilometers.
And then the dark granite from the Mourne Mountains, which is 50 kilometers in the other direction.
Just pause on that. Dragging massive stones 70 kilometers through prehistoric forests and bogs.
They probably used river networks, log rollers, things like that. But think about what that implies. You don't build Newgrange just because you have some downtime.
Yeah.
It implies a massive centralized effort. You need a food surplus to feed the workers. You need a hierarchy, someone in charge, a complex society.
And it wasn't just a pile of rocks. It's a machine, basically, the whole roof box thing.
Yes, that is the genius of it. It's not just a tomb, it's a calendar. The architects engineered the small opening above the entrance, the roof box, so that on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, a beam of sunlight goes down the entire passage and lights up the central chamber.
It hits the floor
Perfectly. It shows this incredibly sophisticated understanding of astronomy and engineering. It tells us these people weren't just surviving winter. They were measuring it, understanding it, maybe even trying to control it ritually.
So we have this massive Stone Age capability, but then the timeline moves to the Bronze Age, and the island basically turns into a gold factory.
It really did.
Yeah.
The source says Ireland became a major exporter of gold. It was like the El Dorado of the ancient West. They were mining copper and working gold into these crescent-shaped collars called lunulae and twisted torques. And these Irish gold artifacts, they turned up all over Europe. It was a trade hub.
But then, as we get to the Iron Age, around 500 BC, the political structure changes. We start seeing the Tuatha.
The Tuatha are crucial for understanding everything that comes later. Ireland wasn't one nation. It was divided into maybe 150 small kingdoms, or Tuatha.
150.
At least. Society becomes very stratified. This is the era of the royal sites. Tara in Meath, Niven Fort in Ulster.
But these weren't cities, right? Not like Rome.
No, not at all. They were ceremonial centers, ritual sites. And this is where that whole land of saints and scholars idea starts to germinate, even before the saints. The source talks about the oral tradition and the pharal.
The poets.
The poet, but so much more. The learned class. Before writing, these people memorized the laws, the genealogies, the history. Thousands of verses.
Wow.
So when Christianity arrives in the 5th century, it's planting seeds in soil that's already incredibly rich, culturally.
So they didn't just accept it, they sort of integrated it.
Exactly. They merged it with their own obsession with words and learning, which explains why the monasteries took off so fast.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the people, but the land itself is such a huge character in this story. The DK Eyewitness Guide paints this picture of a landscape that almost shouldn't exist.
You're thinking of the Burren.
The Burren, yes, in County Clare. It's described as this vast limestone plateau. It looks like the moon, but the guide points out something really weird about the plants.
It's a botanical paradox. In the cracks of that limestone, they call them craigs, you find Arctic alpine plants growing right next to Mediterranean species.
That makes no sense.
It shouldn't. You've got mountain avens, which you'd expect in the Alps, blooming next to spring gentians you'd find in the south of Europe. It's this unique microclimate created by the rock and the Gulf Stream.
And then up north, you have the Giant's Causeway. 40,000 basalt columns stepping into the sea. I love that the guide gives you the science volcanic cooling, but also the myth.
Finn McCool.
Right, Finn McCool building a road to fight a giant in Scotland. It's such a great example of the landscape shaping the storytelling.
Absolutely.
But the urban landscape, the guide mentioned something I hadn't realized. Dublin isn't originally Irish.
Well, not in its urban form, no. The source makes it clear. Dublin began as a Viking long fort, a ship camp, around 841 AD.
So before that, what was there?
The Irish settlement pattern was monastic or rural. Rinforts, farmsteads. The idea a trading town with streets and wharves, that's a Norse import.
That is wild.
Excavations at Wood Quay in Dublin revealed this whole intricate layout of Viking houses. So the capital city is actually a hybrid of Gaelic territory and Norse engineering.
Okay, I have to throw this in before we get serious. The whole St. Patrick drove the snakes out of Ireland thing.
I think I know where you're going with this.
It's not a miracle, it's biogeography. The guide says because Ireland got cut off from Britain by rising seas after the Ice Age, certain animals just never made it across. No moles, no weasels.
Or no snakes.
And no snakes.
Though we do have the natterjack toad, which is an odd one. But yes, the banishing of snakes is a metaphor for a geographical reality.
Okay, so let's pivot. We've established this deep, complex history, this unique landscape, but you can't talk about Ireland without talking about the political architecture. And this is where we turn to the text of the 1998 agreement.
And the tone has to change here. We're moving from ancient history to living memory. The source acknowledges the North-South divide, the Troubles. But what's fascinating about reading the actual text is seeing how they tried to engineer a solution to a problem that seemed completely unsolvable.
It's a dense document, but when you strip away the legalese, it seems like it's built on a few really big, powerful ideas.
It is. It's a masterpiece of compromise. The first and most critical pillar is the consent principle.
So break that down for us. What does that mean?
It's the core compromise on sovereignty. The agreement says Northern Ireland is part of the UK only as long as the majority of people there want it to be. But, and this is the key, it also says a united Ireland can happen, but only if a majority in the North and a majority in the South both vote for it at the same time.
So it takes the gun out of the equation and just replaces it with a ballot box.
Precisely. But the clause that really stands out to me is the birthright clause.
Oh, I highlighted that too. It lets people in Northern Ireland identify as British, Irish, or both.
And hold both British and Irish citizenship. Think about how radical that is. Usually territory defines your citizenship. Here, they detached identity from territory. You can be fully Irish while living in the UK, or you can be both. It just lets people breathe.
It stops identity from being a zero-sum game.
Yes.
And the whole thing is structured into these three strands. Reading it, it felt like a three-legged stool. Kick one leg out, the whole thing falls over.
That's a perfect analogy. Strand 1 is the internal government for Northern Ireland, a 108-member assembly. But here's the kicker. It's not simple majority rule.
Right, because a simple majority was part of the problem.
Exactly. That would just mean unionists could always outvote nationalists. So they built in cross-community support. For any big decision, the budget, electing leaders, you need support from both the unionist and nationalist blocs.
It forces them to cooperate.
It demands it. You literally cannot run the government unless you work with the other side. It's an institutionalized veto that forces consensus.
And then strand 2 is north-south.
Yes, the North-South Ministerial Council. It brings ministers from Belfast and Dublin together to work on practical things: tourism, transport, agriculture.
Stuff that doesn't care about a border.
Exactly. Cows and rivers don't care about the border.
Yeah.
This just manages those realities.
And strand 3 is the British-Irish Council, which brings in Scotland, Wales, the Isle of Man. It's like a big family meeting.
It places the whole Northern Ireland issue in a wider East-West context. It creates a web of relationships so no one feels isolated.
The source also gets into the security section, which must have been just incredibly difficult to negotiate.
Incredibly, it calls for the total disarmament of all paramilitary groups within 2 years. That's the decommissioning we all heard so much about.
Right.
It also mandated police reform and, maybe most controversially, the accelerated release of prisoners.
That must have been a bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow.
It was. I mean, the source text is very sterile. It talks about qualifying prisoners. But for victims of violence, seeing people who had committed terrible acts released early, it was a massive sacrifice.
It's just trading justice for peace.
That was the calculation. You couldn't build a new society if thousands were still in prison for acts committed during the conflict.
So we have this ancient foundation, this modern legal framework. What does the Ireland of today actually look like? The DK Guide gives us a snapshot.
It's young. That's the first thing that jumps out. At the time of the source, 40% of the population in the Republic was under 30. That's a huge contrast to much of Western Europe.
And it seems less traditional.
Definitely. The source notes a huge decline in the strict influence of the Catholic Church. It points to the election of Mary Robinson in 1990, and then Mary McAleese, liberal female presidents who just symbolized a massive shift.
But the culture, the Irishness of it all, that hasn't disappeared. The guide talks a lot about the craic.
Yes, the craic, which is defined not just as fun, but as the center of social life, the conversation, the wit, the atmosphere in a pub.
So the guide does say rural pubs are declining.
It does, which is interesting. Stricter driving laws, smoking bans.
Yeah.
So even that institution is evolving. The social hub is maybe moving from the dark pub to a cafe or a tech office.
And speaking of tech offices, we can't ignore the Celtic Tiger.
The source touches on it. The huge economic boom, the bust in 2008, and the recovery. It was all driven by EU membership and foreign investment. It completely changed Ireland from an agricultural economy to a high-tech hub.
And the sports, too. The guide mentions the obsession with Gaelic games.
It's unique. Hurling and Gaelic football are amateur sports that draw these massive crowds.
Amateur as in the players don't get paid.
They don't get paid. They're teachers, police officers, accountants. It's amazing in the modern world of billion-dollar sports.
How does that even work?
It links back to that ancient tribal identity, the Tuatha. You support your county, you play for your parish. It's incredibly local, but it's a national obsession. It grounds people. You might work for a multinational during the week, but on Sunday, you're representing your tribe.
So when you look at all these sources together, the prehistory, the travel guide, the legal text, what's the big picture here?
For me, it's resilience through adaptation. You see a people who adapted to the post-Ice Age landscape. They adapted to Christianity and merged it with their own laws. They adapted to the Vikings and built cities. And most impressively, with the agreement, they adapted to the end of violence by creating this incredibly sophisticated political machine.
The agreement really does feel like the pivot point for everything.
It is. It shows you could take a history of division, a history that goes all the way back to those Iron Age forts, and you can build a structure to manage it. The The source uses the phrase rigorous impartiality. That's a very modern concept.
Long way from tribal warfare.
A very long way, yet it's designed to govern the same small island. It's a case study in how ancient traditions and modern frameworks can actually coexist.
You can have the Gaelic games and the folklore, but also dual citizenship and cross-community voting.
Exactly. It's about creating space for complexity, accepting that you don't have to be just one thing.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a thought from the agreement itself. It mentions that the North-South Ministerial Council and the Northern Ireland Assembly are mutually interdependent, and that one cannot function without the other.
It's a powerful clause.
Yeah.
It literally ties the institutions together. A safety catch.
So here's the question for you to think about. In a world that feels more and more polarized, where nobody wants to compromise, is that rigid requirement for cross-community consensus, that forced cooperation, is that a shackle that slows everything down? Or is it the only safety net that prevents a society from falling apart?
That is the fundamental question of modern democracy, isn't it? Speed versus stability.
It really is. Thanks for diving in with us.
A pleasure.